Hey everyone, this is Steve from Natural Selection Angling, and we're glad to have you today for another installment of our reel service series. You're going to need a few things, like some reel grease and some reel oil. A sharp craft knife is always a good thing to have handy. Tweezers are absolutely indispensable. Of course, a Phillips head screwdriver. Some kind of stiff brush for cleaning. This is a toothbrush, it's going to work great. And a brush for applying some grease. A wrench. And some isopropyl 99% for a degreaser. Here you see our target today. It's an Okuma cold water 303D line counter reel. And you can see this one my client's using as a downrigger reel, and it's loaded with a 2-color lead core secret weapon rig. And this is designed just to get your bait further behind and lower than the downrigger ball when you're trolling. It's a very stealthy presentation, very common, very popular. So you can see the reel's in decent shape. It's got a lot of boat rash and so forth, but it's in decent mechanical shape. Let's go ahead and take it apart. I'm going to start with this side cover, and this will just snap right off. Well, it looks pretty good in there. We'll pull out this level wind eye support, and we'll pull the spool out. When you get the spool out, especially if it's spooled with wire line, make sure that you take care of that and re-spool the line and put a piece of tape or a rubber band over it, because you really don't want this stuff bird nesting off of the spool while you're working on the reel, creating another problem for yourself to fix before you can send the reel back to your customer or you can fish with it. Okay, so let's take the other side cover off now, and we're just going to start with the smallest screw here and then work our way around the case. And we'll pull the whole drivetrain right off the reel. And that looks pretty good. I'm pretty surprised it's in that good condition inside. And the frame looks pretty good too. No real damage or problems. Everything seems like it's in good working order. So now we're going to take this wrench and we're going to remove the nut that retains the handle. So we'll just back that off and make sure you save the washer that's underneath it. And we'll put that in the tray. And we'll take off the keeper. So this is a small machine screw that holds the keeper on. Don't drop it or lose it, it's small. And we'll take that with the keeper and we'll put that in the parts tray. Now we can take the handle off and we'll set that aside. Notice this plastic washer on here with the divots. Make sure you keep track of that thing. That's the noise maker for when you turn the star drag and it clicks. It's got a metal washer affixed to the back of it too. And here's the star washer for the drag. And on these models, you just be careful with this little pin. There's a little pin, it's like a nipple that rides on a spring, and that's what makes the noise with that plastic washer when you turn the drag wheel. Just don't lose it. I'm going to take off this cage spring. I'm going to take this nut off of the shaft here, and these are just hand tight. You're not going to need a wrench for this, but it's going to be a little slippery because it's got oil and grease on it. So a rag helps grip it, and then we'll just go ahead and take that nut right off. So there it is. Make sure you save the washer. Oh, there's two of them on there. Okay, now under here, you can see there's some bent washers. These are tensioner washers. So you're just going to pull the whole stack off and just keep them in the order that you took them out. Okay, now here you can see a plastic bushing and a spacer sleeve. And the bushing just simply covers the bearings to keep dust and dirt out. And here's the tensioner knob. So we'll dismount that and have a look. Doesn't look dirty, but the grease is really stiff and sticky. Now let's take that line counter off. Just be careful with these. They're long, skinny screws, and they're coarse threaded, and they just drive into the plastic, so they can get pretty tight. Don't strip them. And don't forget this little guy on the other side. Okay, get that out of there. Now the line counter will come off. And let's have a look at that while we have it out. It looks really clean. It's well oiled. Everything's in good shape. Let's just pull it out of the housing and have a look. Give it a quick inspection. Everything looks good. At this point, if the window were scratched up, I would buff it out with some Flitz polish. And then we'll just remount the counter and make sure everything works. Spins. And we'll set that aside. This is the business end of the reel. It's essentially the entire drivetrain is behind this cover. So I'm going to go ahead and take this apart. Get these screws out. Okay, now the last screw that has to come out, it'll just spin because it's moving the same direction as the drivetrain is. So I put the handle on just so I can hold the handle and stop the screw from turning. And I put the handle on upside down so it fits easier in my hand. This is a good trick. A lot of this work is pinching things together with your non-dominant hand while you work on it with your dominant hand. All right, let's not lose this little washer. Let's keep it with that flat-headed screw. Okay, this cover comes right off, and you can see it's very clean. Just be aware in that center hole, there's a little piece of brass that's usually press fit into the cover. And you'll see that it fell out of the cover and it's just sitting on top of the gear system here. So that'll become apparent later. All right, let's get this spacer off and this plastic bushing. This is the anti-reverse dog. This is what stops the reel from going backwards. And that sits on a little post that you can pull out too. All right, set that aside. Now let's take off the jack. And this is what engages and disengages the reel. So there's a very small machine screw here. And there is a little tiny copper washer. Just don't lose those pieces. You can see I'm doing my best to lose them. Just keep everything together. Have a system for when you take things apart and put them back together, especially if you're not working off of the schematics. Okay, so now we can take the main drive gear out and the drag system. There's your pinion gear. And here's the collar or the yoke that goes across the pinion gear. And you'll see the couple of little springs here that ride on posts. And that's what that yoke will sit on top of. There's some sticky grease in there, but it looks pretty good overall. Okay, so if you're doing a drag replacement, this is where you're going to get started. Just be aware there's a little tiny spring in there. Don't lose it. It's inside that little pocket. All right, so we pop the top piece off, and you can see the spring is stuck to it. And set that aside. Now we can take out all the drag washers. And in this video, I'm simply going to inspect these, clean them, and remount them because they're in great shape. But if you're doing an upgrade or you're changing the drags, you're just going to do the same workflow. It's a common 6 drag washer system, and just keep them in order the way you took them out. The one with the big hole goes on the bottom. Let's separate the main drive gear here from the anti-reverse system. And we'll take off this plastic washer as well. And again, it's probably best that you download the schematics for these reels. They're all available online. If you're not mechanically inclined, you're really going to want to follow along with the video tutorial while you have the schematics in front of you. It's very common that when I work on these reels, I find parts and pieces missing. And if all you're going to do really is take it apart and put it back together the way you found it, you could be recreating the same problem that the previous servicer or person who attempted to fix a broken reel left for you. So we'll just get this piece nice and clean. And you'll see a lot of these tackle shops, and you'll see on videos online, these folks don't really go after the cleaning of the reel very aggressively. They only change the part they're paid to change, right? But if this is your own stuff, or if you want a real full service done on it, make sure you tell the technician or your service provider that you want the real deal. And this is the way I do everything. Everything will be spotless when this reel goes back together. There's some sticky residue here that isn't wiping off easily. So a simple trick for this is to use some 99% isopropyl alcohol, and I put it in a little needle bottle so I can put it exactly where I want it. I just give it a couple seconds to work on that sticky residue, and then you can wipe it off. All right, here's the spool. It's about the simplest thing that goes into this reel. And we're going to clean off the old grease. You can see that there's a bearing here that rides on the shaft. This is the most important bearing as far as spool rotation is concerned. And at the other end, we have some plastic gears, and we're going to give those a good cleaning too. Give the spool a little wipe down. Okay. Back into the cover that's opposite from the drivetrain. You can see here that there's a roller bearing that sits in a little pocket in the bottom. Sometimes this is loose and it can fall out. Other times it's captured in there by some grease. But I like to take it out and clean it, clean the housing that it sits in. And an easy way to do this is to use a brush and just sweep up the grease that's in there and get all the dirt that might be in there as well. For now, I'm just going to put the bearing back where it's supposed to sit. And we're going to move on to the next step. All right, before I put the bearing back into the housing, I'm going to put a little grease in there. And I've explained this in other videos, but I like this Frabil Sub-Zero grease because it's very light duty. It won't freeze. I fish in the winter a lot, all winter. And, you know, you don't want the grease being cold and binding up and just causing more problems. So I like this grease. Now, It won't last as long as some higher viscosity greases, but I take really good care of my stuff and I clean my reels every year like this. And for my clients that, are 2, 3, 4, 5 year maintenance plan kind of people, I'll use a different grease. I'll just use Penn reel grease in there. This reel happens to be going to my fishing partner, so I know how he likes his stuff and I take care of all of his stuff, so I'm just going to take care of it. All right, once we put the bearing down into that pocket, we'll just oil the bearing as well. And I'm going to use the tip of these tweezers to just spread the oil around the bearing. You don't want to flood it. You just want to put a drop on and then rotate the bearing while you spread the oil around. And you guys can tell me in the comments if you have any special tips or tricks or experience with this particular reel. I'm interested to hear it. Of course, if you have any questions, I will answer them. I'm going to give this good greasing on the gear here. And I'm going to do a little bit of greasing on the clicker too, because it's metal on metal. Just clean it and grease it. If you like this kind of content and you appreciate the videos that I'm making, please consider liking and subscribing. I've never asked before. You'll notice there's no pop-ups on any of my videos that say subscribe, and I never interrupt a video to ask for your subscription. But I have enough content up there now that you can get a good idea of what my channel's about by watching the videos. I think I have close to 30 now, so I think it's fair to ask for it now. If you're enjoying these videos, and especially these series about the mechanics of reels, please give me a like and subscribe, because it means a lot to me and it helps my tiny little channel grow. So this method works really well for me. What I like to do is just put the brush behind the level wind eye and then advance the gear and let the brush chase along the backside of the gear, and you'll see lots of dirty grease comes out of there. Just don't pinch the bristles of the brush and break them off in there. Then you probably have to take it apart and clean it. But this part generally doesn't need to be taken apart. What you're going to do is you're just going to run the level wind eye back and forth and make sure that it doesn't bind or stick anywhere. And a good idea is to check the spool itself. And if you see the spool has very even loading, the level wind's probably in good shape. But if you have a line piling up on one side or there's binding, you have to take apart that assembly and change out the pawl. So here we're just going to give the main gear a good cleaning. As you can see, my theory of maintenance is ABC, always be cleaning. This is just a very relaxing experience for me, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. I hope you enjoy following along with my successes and failures. That's nice and clean. All right, let's clean up this plastic washer. Then let's get the anti-reverse system and the main shaft. Okay, we'll get a little grease here, and we're just going to grease between the metal plate and the plastic washer, and we'll place the plastic washer back on the shaft. We'll grease the top of that plastic washer, and then we'll put the main gear back on. Okay, we'll drop the gear onto the shaft. And that looks good. Nice and smooth and slippery. Okay, now we're going to deal with these drag washers. The first one's got the big hole in it. And these are kind of like a fabric type washer. So, and they've got like a crosshatch on them. And what happens is as they wear down, the material that's been stripped away kind of clogs that, and it'll have like a, mixed with grease, it'll have like a sticky, greasy film on it. And you can see I just use a stiff brush to brush it off. And metal washers, they're easy. Give that a good cleaning. Drop it back on the shaft. Moving on to the next drag washer. You could see the sticky black grease that's coming off of these. And you'll notice that I'm putting these in dry. This is going to be used on Lake Michigan, freshwater only. And the best performance from these units is if the drag is dry. So this ear washer sits on top, and it has 4 tabs that fit into the slots of the main gear, and the tabs face down. Here you can see this guy's super greasy. So give him a wipe down, and just be careful when you're doing this, like with a paper towel. You're not going to be using a lot of pressure here because you don't want the paper towel to sacrifice against the drag and leave dust behind, or little pieces of paper. So not a lot of pressure, just a good wipe down. Okay, this is the last washer to go into the stack, and it's a concave washer. And you'll see the side that's concave faces down, and there's a little washer that goes underneath it as well. That's this guy. So we'll give him a good cleaning and drop him down on the shaft. And then this concave / convex washer goes on top with the concave side down, convex side up. And that's your drag service right there. Moving right along. Get the jack cleaned up, get all the grease off of it. We're going to re-grease it too, but let's just get it clean. And pinion gear, we're going to clean that up. It's best to use a stiff brush on gears like this. They're sharp and they're deep, and a paper towel doesn't do justice. But as you're cleaning these, you should be kind of thinking about it and making sure that you're checking the teeth, and they should be sharp, like shave with this sharp, And if you see that these gears are rounded off or worn down, or they're sacrificing themselves against one another, and you're finding the pieces in there, it's time to change them out. Just give that yoke a wipe down. This is the spool tensioner knob. Right, we looked at this before. You're taking that sticky grease out of it. And if you look inside it, there's just a little brass plate in there that's captured, but it floats, right? So the spool seats in the little concavity in the middle of that floating brass plate. And as you tighten the tensioner knob down, that pushes against the spool, the shaft of the spool, and slows the spool. And that's how the tensioner knob works. And you can see here, I'm just pushing the brush through the threads backwards, right? So it's stiffer. Rather than drawing it, I'm pushing it, and that'll clear out those threads. And you can see how much green grease came off the brush. Okay, here's the star drag adjuster. Again, remember, little pin, little spring. And you see, I just touched it with my glove, and it stuck to the glove, came right out and fell. So just be aware of these things. I mean, it's not a showstopper. It won't stop the reel from working, but your drag won't click anymore when you adjust it. Look at that little tiny spring. Don't lose these. See how they like to jump like fleas? They'll find their way into a dark, dirty corner of your workspace, and you'll be looking for them. All right, back to cleaning. Right, so the trick here, a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to break up that grease, and then give it a wipe down. So it's clean. Set it aside for now. Okay, so in the center here where the handle attaches, where the shaft goes through, there's a needle bearing in there. I'm going to put a couple drops of oil on it. Okay, keep these pinched together when you perform this operation, because if the drag washers move and the ears of the ear washer come out of the pockets, then you have to reset the stack. No big deal, but you want everything aligned. I'm just going to grease this main gear. And that looks pretty good now. Okay, best done this way, shaft up. And just go ahead and put the whole stack in, and when it makes contact with the frame, then it's safe to let go. And again, going back to how we do a lot of this work, it's going to be pinching it together with your non-dominant hand while you work on it with your dominant hand. So you can see I'm holding everything together as I'm working here. And what I like to do is I like to attach the handle assembly and get this entire subassembly working before I go any further. So I'm going to put that plastic bushing back in to cover that bearing and keep it clean. And then that spacer goes on top. And here come the tensioner washers going back on the way they came off. Sometimes these can be a little tricky to seat down. Don't force them. Don't destroy the threads. Just wiggle them. Man, they're nice and clean and they look good. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put this nut back on. And remember, it has two washers, right? A little metal washer and a little plastic washer. Then we're going to put this nut back on. Now, the general rule here is just going to be to tighten it as tight as you can by hand. Right? You don't need to put a wrench on it. You don't want to crush the tensioner washers. They have a purpose. And if you crush them to flat, then why did we bother? Right, so I'm just using a rag to help me gain some grip and turn this. By the way, I gave blood recently and they told me they couldn't find a vein. It was very difficult to find a vein. I think vascularity is my strong suit. Okay, that's good. Okay, moving right along. Now we're going to put that little spring back in that pocket, and then we're going to put that tiny little plunger right back in its home. That thing's so small. And you'll see how it proceeds to give me fits. A trick I've learned here is to use the tweezers upside down, so that the little plunger head sits on top of them, and you're grabbing the shaft of the plunger, and then get it started and seat it down in there. And just be aware that if you have any grease on your fingers or anything like that, when you pull your finger away, that thing's going to stick to your finger, fall on the floor, roll away, and your drag will never click again. Okay, so now we got the noisemaker seated in the pocket. Now we're going to clean up this plastic washer. Remember, the divoted side faces down, and that's what makes the noise. All right, and then there's a little metal washer on top, and don't forget that. Right now, this is just pre-staged. I'm not going to put it on because I still have to mount the star drag. I don't want that thing to pop off when I do it. So you can see I put this basket spring back on. The large side faces up. And back to our theme here. My left hand's getting exercised by squeezing these pieces together. And you really want to squeeze that drag down. Make sure nothing can move in there. Okay, so we got our little noisemaker on there and the little metal washer on its back. Give it a little wipe. Make sure it's perfectly clean. Now we're going to go ahead and remount the handle. These ones give me fits because there's 2 flat sides on the shaft, but there's 4 flat sides in the hole. So you just have to figure out which 2 actually work. So once we've got that mounted, again, now I'm just going to continue to move my left thumb up the stack and pinch down on the highest part. Right? So now I'm pinching down on the handle itself. Okay, little washer, little nut. And once you've got a few turns on this nut and it's secure, you're in no danger of things flying away on you. Because remember, everything you're pinching together is spring-loaded, right? So if you let go or make a mistake, you know, it literally can fly apart from the spring pressure. And what we're going to do here is we're going to nearly tighten this. Not quite, but close. And you don't want to tighten it all the way, because you're going to have to adjust it for the keeper. But you can see the drag clicks, the little noisemaker works. That's important. Okay, now we're going to tackle the pinion gear, get that nice and greased up. That looks good. Okay, we're going to apply the yoke, and I edited out putting the little springs on the post. But remember the 2 springs from the beginning? Just put them down on the post, and then this yoke rides on top, and it has a spring to it. And this is how the drive gear engages and disengages as the pinion gear grabs the main drive gear. Now, sometimes it's difficult to get a pinion gear down in there and mesh it with the drive gear when the drive gear is already installed. You could just wiggle it around and it'll drop in there. Okay, now we have this cover that goes over the anti-reverse, right? And remember, it had a little spring attached to it, and you can see next to the brush, that little spring is on the paper towel. When this goes on, it needs to sit flat and flush, and you'll see that there's a couple little apertures here, and then there's some little bent pieces that are hanging down from this piece, little tangs that go into the slots. And what I like to do is I like to put the spring into the pocket after I put this piece on, and then I just use the tweezers to compress the spring and push the head of it down so it's up against that stop. Washer. Boom. Easier said than done. Okay, now remember this little press fit bushing that I told you about from the cover? Let's just snap that back into the cover now. Okay, here's the anti-reverse dog, and you can see I've attached it and pushed the beak up against the anti-reverse gear, and then I dropped the post in the hole. Now we're attaching the jack, and don't forget this little tiny copper washer. Good. Now, impossibly tiny screw. And I'm a big man, and these are tiny. So here we'll just go ahead and snug that down. And you can tell basically when you have it snugged enough because you'll see that the lever starts to move. Okay, everything looks good here. Moving on. Okay, this cover should go on very easy and sit flat. If it doesn't, you've made some kind of mistake. And you can see I just used the handle of the paintbrush to center up the pinion gear so that the cover closes. And we'll go ahead and put these screws back in. I'm going to start with the main gear screw. And this time we don't have to worry about bracing the handle because we're turning clockwise and it's going against the anti-reverse of the reel. So it won't turn. Now there's a little plastic washer underneath there. Just before you snug it down, you can see that I just pushed that washer underneath. And you want to do that so that this standoff stays flush and flat. If it's on one side of the washer and not on the other, that can cause other problems that we can talk about later. Okay, we'll get the other screws into this cover. And get them all snug. All right, everything turns smoothly. The transmission works. Looks good. Wipe down any dirt, debris, excess oil or grease. We'll go ahead and put a couple drops of oil here on the handle knob shaft. Give it a spin. Another little drop opposite to that one and give it a spin. And it exceeds the frame rate and goes the other way. Pretty fast. Good. This looks good. Now we're going to do some work on the frame. Checking the function of the worm gear. Everything looks good. We cleaned it before. Now we're going to grease it. Let's go ahead and put some grease in there and then continuously advance the gear. And you'll see that the grease spreads throughout the worm gear and inside the housing. And then you're just going to take off the excess. Looking pretty good. Okay, moving on. Let's deal with this line counter now. I'm going to go ahead and put some oil on its main drive gear. Give it a turn. You'll see this whole assembly should be nice and oily and nice and clean. Okay, so we'll just snap it back together and then we'll go ahead and put the screws in. Okay, let's screw these in. And just be careful with these because they're coarse threaded screws and they're tight and they're easy to strip. All right, that looks good. Now we're going to pick up the grease. We're going to grease the gear at the end of the line counter shaft. And then we're going to put a drop of oil on the shaft where it goes into the body of the counter. And I probably should have done that before when I had it in my hand, but it's okay. I'm just going to take the brush and advance the gear so that that oil works around the shaft and into the housing. That's done. No biggie. Okay, next we're going to go back and do some work on the frame. I'm going to grease this gear. And once that's greased, then we're going to go ahead and marry up the drivetrain to the frame. This side's pretty simple. Just get it lined up and it'll fit right together. Easy. Okay, then we're just going to hold the reel together while we put the screws in. Okay, that looks good. Everything seems to be in working order. Worm gear turns, counter counts. It's best to do some quick down and dirty checking as you move along because, you know, the differential diagnosis is easier if you just worked on a part and then something doesn't work, right? You know where it came from. Now let's take the spool bearing and give that a couple drops of oil and spin it. That's working good. This is the most important bearing as far as the spool is concerned. And then let's grease that shaft as well. Okay, now on the other side, there's a plastic gear. We cleaned it earlier. We're just going to grease it now. That looks good. Okay, there it is. The long side of the spool shaft goes down into the drivetrain. And if everything is done correctly, it'll just drop right in and you can hear it click in. Okay, this is the guide support for the level wind eye. So this just floats. There's nothing holds it in, but just when you push it through, make sure the level wind eye sits on top of it, right? And then just push it into the slot on the other side. And it's just a slip fit. Okay, we're going to grease the gear on the other side now. And we're in the home stretch. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and replace this cover. And you'll see that the gears don't mesh perfectly almost ever when you put the cover on. But a small turn of the handle, don't squeeze hard, turn gently. You don't want to crack or break anything. That'll snap the cover together as the gears mesh, and then we can go ahead and put the screws in for this too. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now we can see the whole reel works. Handle turns smoothly, clicker works. Everything's looking good. Got a few pieces left to install. But like I said, I like to check everything after each sub-assembly is completed. Put some fresh grease in this spool tensioner cap, and then we'll go ahead and sit it down. Now when the reel is in free spool, this is what keeps tension on it. The tighter you turn this down, the slower the spool will move. Nice clicking from the drag. Everything seems to be working well. Okay. Now let's deal with the keeper. Okay, remember before we tightened this nut, but not all the way. Maybe like 3/4 or 7/8 of the way. And then we're going to put the keeper on top, and usually the hole doesn't line up. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to advance this nut a little bit, tighten it until the hole lines up. And that's why we left ourselves a little bit of stroke left on this. You don't want to over tighten anything. That has perfect alignment now. So my tiny little machine screw that I took care not to lose is going to go straight in. And then we'll drive that home. And once the keeper's set, this will disallow the nut from backing off. It can't go anywhere. Free spool works good. Loosen up the tension, works even better. Loosen it up more, works even better yet. It's got a pretty nice flow to it for a big heavy reel. Everything looks really good here. Okay, now typically the last couple things I do after I check everything works and everything's in good condition, I will then do my final oilings, which are going to be the transmission lever and the clicker button. Some serious anti-aging happened to this reel. It's like brand new again. A little bit of oil, work the clicker button back and forth. Wipe off the excess. Okay, then we have the transmission lever. And we'll put a drop of oil here and work the part. And put a drop of oil on the other side and work the part. Okay, now here's the bonus content. Once the spool's been removed, you have to time the reel, right? And it's hard to see here, so I'm doing it with the lead core line. I hope you can see it in the video that the level wind eye is moving the opposite direction from where the line is on the spool. Okay, so this is just gonna create a lot of pressure against the level wind eye and stop line from flowing out of the spool and just make it harder to deploy and harder to reel. Right, so we're going to set that timing, and I'm going to show you like a real down and dirty, fast way to do it. That'll be plenty good enough. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull on this line until the level wind eye reaches its final destination and then barely starts to return. Then I'm going to uncouple the side here so that the gear is not meshed, and I'm going to pull on the line until the line goes to the end of the spool and just comes off the end of the spool. And then I'm going to re-engage the gear and put the cover back on. But now where the line is flowing from the spool is directly behind the level wind eye. This is critical. You can have problems with broken pawls, broken level wind eyes, chafing of your line. You can break off a big fish, right? We don't want that. So let's just go ahead and button this reel up. Wound the string back up, and now you don't want the reel to come out of timing again. Okay, so you don't want this line to go back into the reel. But you can see as I strip it off that it's absolutely perfect and flowing straight out of the middle of that level wind eye. All right, good. Now I'm just going to keep that in place by putting a piece of tape across the side of the reel. Tape that line down so it can't fall back into the reel. You could tie something onto it and wind it up, or you could put a rubber band on it, but I'm going to put this onto a rod later. So I'm just going to tape it off here, and then when I string the rod, I'll terminate it. All right, guys, that's a wrap. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. It's been great working with you today.